Hi, my name is Lena. I'm a senior English and Cinema Studies student at the University of Tennessee. I graduate in 1 week, and what you were watching is the last thing that stands between me and my degree. So, some backstory. 1 year ago, I was taking an advanced fiction writing class at UT. It was supposed to be like the capstone of my major, the last writing class in the series of writing classes in the English curriculum for the English creative writing majors. But life, as it tends to do, hit a snag for me, and I was unable to complete the coursework for that class. Amazing. But thankfully, my professor kind of bailed me out, and we came to an agreement that I would take an incomplete grade in the class, which means that she'll delay putting in my grades for that class, given I complete all of that classwork at a later date. Great, fantastic. Now, here's the catch. I had 1 year from the time of that incomplete grade to complete all of the classwork. I'm being dramatic. I'm being dramatic. At the time that I'm filming this, I've actually already done most of the coursework. What you're watching right now is actually a part of that coursework, but admittedly, this has kind of sort of been a race to the finish line. Let me explain what you're watching here. In the advanced fiction class, each student creates what is called a grading contract. And in that grading contract, we all get to establish our own curriculum. What do we want to study? What do we want to work on? What projects will we focus on? And what outcome on those projects would determine a grade of A, B, C, D, etc., etc. Each of us then goes in, we pick a primary project and a secondary project, and then we work on both of those projects throughout the entirety of the semester. And I decided that because I'm a film and English major, I wanted to write a short story and then begin the process of turning that short story into a screenplay. Okay, simple enough so far. Then there was the secondary project. That project needed to be writing adjacent. I decided that I wanted to make a 10 to 15 minute video doing research on the process of adapting from a book to a feature-length film. That's where that's where my bad ideas started. So what I found is that actually my two projects were more like 5 projects. It's a short story. It's a treatment. It's a script. It's a video script, and it's a completed video essay. So that proved to be way too much for me to handle at that point in my life. So what you are watching is the culmination of all of my classwork. A combination of my primary and secondary projects, and a whole documentation of my creative process, beginning with the development of my short story, progressing into the creation of a treatment, and concluding with me writing a screenplay, all intercut with my research on adaptation and how to adapt a book into a movie. What a whirlwind this has been. I hope you enjoy. Let's hit the ground running. What is an adaptation? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, to adapt is to change, alter, or modify something so that it can be used in a new context or for a new purpose. In modern English, the word adaptation has 2 common usages. The first is to become adjusted or used to new conditions, or to change one's behavior or attitude to suit a different environment. This definition can be used to describe momentary changes, such as changing your personality to be able to fit in an uncomfortable scenario, or it can be used to describe more permanent or long-term changes, such as the evolutionary process of biological adaptation. The second usage is to bring about, develop, or construct by process of adaptation, or to produce or construct by modifying an existing thing of the same or a similar type, to adapt from a source. This definition is where the process of film adaptation stems from, but there are actually more similarities between film adaptation and biological adaptation than you would think at a first glance. The 2002 Spike Jonze film Adaptation notably highlights the similarities between scientific adaptation and literary adaptation. The story follows a fictionalized version of real-life screenwriter Charlie Kaufman, played by Nicolas Cage, as he attempts to adapt a windingly written non-fiction book about orchids and an orchid poacher. Simultaneously, the film shows the writer of this book, Susan Orlean, played by Meryl Streep, as she travels to Florida to research and interview orchid poacher John LaRoche, played by Chris Cooper. At first, this film doesn't seem like an adaptation of anything. It just appears to follow a man as he struggles to fashion an interesting narrative out of a boring and convoluted book, alongside the author of the book as she writes it. But, as it turns out, this film actually is adapted from a real-life book about an orchid poacher. The Orchid Thief is a real book by New Yorker writer Susan Orlean, and she really did meet and write about a poacher named John LaRoche. But she didn't sleep with him, or do drugs, or kill anybody, like what's shown in the film. Now, Jonze and Kaufman's adaptation of The Orchid Thief brings up questions that I hear all the time in casual conversation about book-to-movie adaptations. Is this even a good or valid adaptation if it strays this far from the source material? Like, you hear these complaints from readers all the time when books get turned into movies. I can't believe they left this part out. They added that scene. That wasn't in the book. The book is so much better than the movie. And these same arguments, although more heavily researched and worded more eloquently, form some of the beginning arguments in adaptation theory. Specifically, these lend themselves to the F word of adaptation theory: fidelity. Essentially, fidelity refers to the degree to which something is faithful. A lot of times you hear this in the context of infidelity or cheating in a relationship. But in the context of film, if something is high fidelity, then it is considered to be pretty close or pretty faithful to the source material. The argument over the importance of fidelity in film adaptation and film theory has created a lot of debate among academics, or as one of my professors likes to put it, there's a lot of academic shade being thrown. For instance, in the paper on the appreciation of cinematic adaptations, Paisley Livingston argues for the validity of assessing fidelity in film adaptation, stating that a large number of elements need to be consistent from source to screen in order to be a valid adaptation. He says, for a work to be an adaptation, many of the distinguishing and characteristic features of this source, such as the title, setting, main characters, and central elements of the plot, must be expressly adopted and imitated in the new work. He elaborates further, saying, there is no precise determination regarding the number and kinds of features that must be taken over from the source if a work is to be an adaptation, and not merely a work loosely inspired by an anterior work. So, there's a line somewhere that divides works into either adaptation or loosely inspired by. That line exists somewhere, and there's no real definition or set requirements that determines if a film falls into one category or the other. That leaves a lot of room for debate. After reading Livingston's argument, James Harold further dissects and critiques this take on fidelity in The Value of Fidelity in Adaptation. Harold points out holes that Livingston left in his argument. He states, Livingston claims that fidelity is not one thing. There is, he argues, no such thing as global fidelity. No film could be faithful to its source in every respect, because adaptations by their nature include departures, at minimum, those necessary to the change of medium from the source. But he does not take this point further. He does not explore what some of these different kinds of fidelity are. Now that's just two people's takes on this. There are dozens of papers and journal articles of people just researching and dissecting and attempting to redefine what it means to be a true adaptation. But for me personally, I don't know how essential being completely faithful to a source material is for making a good adaptation. I mean, there are plenty of good adaptations that really aren't anything like the source material at all. But I haven't gone to grad school yet, so what do I know? For the purposes of this video, an adaptation film is a film that draws heavily from some pre-existing source material. Maybe they keep everything the same from this source material. Maybe they just keep the vibes. But it came from somewhere, and in this case, that is what matters the most. Welcome. I'm recording this little interjection just to kind of give you an update on where I am in my writing process. I'm currently in the middle of my writing process, and I'm recording these little breaks in the video to kind of give you an update on where I am, how my writing is going, where I'm at in the writing process. Am I going to have a mental breakdown? Has the earth exploded? I don't know. But yeah, these are just to kind of track my process as I'm doing this. So today is Sunday, April 16th, and I've written roughly 3 pages of my short story, and I don't know how long this thing is going to be. Been working on it off and on since January, trying to make some progress, so and I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, you've been working on this since January. How do you only have 3 pages written? Well, listen, that's not exactly how it went. This one that I'm working on right now is actually the 3rd story that I have started. So what had happened was when I was writing in my fiction writing class, I had this short story that I was working on, this little horror short that I actually really liked and probably will continue writing at some point. The issue with it was that I had imagined it already as a short film, so it kind of felt like it was cheating to me to write that, because I wouldn't be adapting a short story into a film. I was more like adapting a film concept into a short story, and that didn't really achieve what I wanted it to achieve. Also, I absolutely hated writing this thing as a short story. It was painful for me to do it, so tossed that one. So I started another story, and I've been writing that one throughout this semester. I worked on it in little bits and pieces when I was traveling with basketball pep band, going to all the tournaments and stuff, and it was a really interesting experience, having to write on planes and on subways, just generally having to write while I traveled. There was just one problem with it. I fucking hated the story. Despised it with my entire being. It's fine. I'm not worried at all. I'm not worried. I have another story now, and I actually do like this one. I've got a lot of writing to do. And then, it'll be a lot of writing, lots of really long nights, lots of coffee, a lot of coffee. But hopefully something good will come out of this. Or at the very least, something readable. We'll see. When it comes to film adaptations, most people are immediately going to think of book-to-movie adaptations. They're going to think of Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings. Many film adaptations do come from books, but some come from comic books, or TV shows, or plays, or video games, or theme park rides, or restaurants, or whatever the hell that is. I don't know. Or they can come from short stories. I think short stories are actually really well suited for film adaptations. They're often self-contained narratives that don't require a ton of outside information to establish. They can be told in a relatively short amount of time, and as any book-to-movie reader fan will tell you, 2 hours often is not enough time to do justice to like a 200-300 page book. They're also not as difficult to pare down to its most essential elements. There's not as much side content you have to cut. You don't have to build up as many characters most of the time. But the question still remains, how does the adaptation process start? Based on the research that I've done, first and foremost, know and understand how screenplays work. There's plenty of resources online and in print that'll help explain the format, the writing style, other conventions of how a screenplay functionally works, because understanding the ins and outs of screenwriting is essential to making a good screenplay and therefore a good adaptation from a different medium. After learning the medium that you're transferring into, a good place to start is by making an outline of the plot of the source material. If your goal is to adapt as closely to the source material as possible, start writing down the plot of the story beat by beat to create a skeleton of the narrative. Then, start to consider essential questions about your characters and their conflicts. Who is your protagonist? Who is your antagonist? What are each of their goals, and how do they achieve them throughout the course of the story? What are the stakes that are raised against your protagonist? Writing a treatment might be a really good way for you to get all of this on paper. Whatever works, works. From there, you can consider the narrative structure that the source material has. Is it a linear narrative? Is there a lot of thoughts or descriptions in the text? Is it written in letters? Are there a bunch of flashbacks? Remember that a film is an audiovisual media, and sometimes you need to think outside of the box to create audiovisual solutions to text-based problems. That's all fine and good, but how does this process differ when you're adapting your own work to the screen? It's not super common, but sometimes authors do end up being the screenwriters who adapt their works to the screen for a film. One of the more prominent examples of that is Stephen Chbosky, the author of Perks of Being a Wallflower, who wrote the book in 1999 and then in 2012 wrote and directed the film adaptation. Chbosky was actually like the first writer who got me interested in screenwriting as a career. Before that, I had always just been interested in novel writing, and it had never really occurred to me that the person who was the author could also be a screenwriter and be a creative force in film. So I'm really excited to have a chance to kind of look into his process and see how he was able to take his treasured work and bring it to the big screen for a big audience. Surprisingly, I couldn't find a whole ton of information about his process of adapting his own work. Most of the interviews from like 2012 are more about the film itself and his experiences, like how did you get inspiration for this? Why did you choose letter writing format? What was it like working with Emma Watson? Not really a ton about his actual screenwriting process, but I did come across an interview with Script Magazine that does go into Chbosky as a filmmaker, as a writer, and using that and my analysis of the book and the movie itself and the screenplay itself, I'm going to piece together what I can about Chbosky's writing process and what things are required to be pared down, added, altered in order to make a good movie adaptation. Starting off, I think the most obvious difference between the book and the movie is the letter writing format. Perks of Being a Wallflower, the book, is told through a series of letters that the main character, Charlie, is writing to an unnamed person who he only refers to as friend throughout the entire course of the narrative. Obviously, you can't really just show letter writing through film. That's a little boring, and at that point, if you're just going to be reading letters on screen, you might as well just read the book. So, how does Chbosky address this, and how does he take this letter writing format and turn it into an audiovisual experience for the audience? What Chbosky has elected to do is show Charlie physically writing the letters and then use his voiceover to give the impression that he is writing or telling this story directly to someone off screen.
I am writing to you because she said you listen and understand and didn't try to sleep with that person at that party even though you could have.
Another difference is with the development of some of the characters. Because the entirety of the book is told through letters, there's not a strong need for deep characterization of the side characters, as Charlie only really has to relay information about them to the reader. We do get a sense of who they are through the storytelling, but some things are not entirely fleshed out. For instance, throughout the book, Charlie never mentions the names of his brother or sister. The book is able to go without saying their names because in the book, we never directly see or interact with any of these characters. We only hear about them secondhand through Charlie's recounting of the events. However, in the movie, because the medium brings the viewer into the same space as these characters, names are given to them, Candace for the sister and Chris for the brother. There are also some moments where we as the audience are physically apart from Charlie, such as during Charlie's breakdown when we cut to Candace and her friends. In these moments, we are away from our narrator, so the characters need to be able to stand up on their own. Hence, the additional characterization that Chbosky adds to them in the screenplay. Another thing to consider in writing, and even in filming and editing, is being aware of what scenes are doing for your film. A scene that was present in the book that did not end up in the movie was a scene in which Charlie drives his sister to a pregnancy clinic to get an abortion. This scene was intended to be in the film, and was even filmed, but it ended up being cut from the final film. In an interview with Hypable, Chbosky said, "It was the last thing that got cut, and it broke my heart because it was just too much for the movie." It's really important to consider what each scene does for your film. Is it moving the plot forward? Is it providing characterization? Or is it just pulling down the pacing of your film or the mood of your audience? And when you're adapting your own work, sometimes you have to be ready to part with scenes that really meant a lot to you while you're writing or you were really proud of. Killing your darlings is always a really difficult part in filmmaking and screenwriting and writing in general. But you have to be prepared to do everything you can do to create a cohesive, flowing, impactful narrative for your audience. In the Script Magazine interview, Chbosky was asked if, due to the book's reputation for being banned in libraries, he needed to sacrifice any of the content in the book for the movie adaptation. Chbosky answered that thankfully, no, he didn't have to cut anything. He said, "As far as the rating is concerned, I knew what the expectation of the banned school districts and townships across the county. Any 13 to 16-year-old, for the most part, could get the book from the library at their school or their town, and I wanted kids to have the same access to the movie. So, at a very early stage, I studied all of the movies that were PG-13 or PG that pushed the envelope and talked about real issues in a real way. I studied these movies and realized what the general rules were, and luckily, I didn't have to compromise anything. I could talk about everything I wanted to talk about within those rules." However, he did note one thing that he intentionally wanted to cut from the movie: the smoking. But this was for personal reasons as opposed to needing to censor it for ratings. So, now that I've gotten a little bit of knowledge about how my inspiration did it and what the process looks like, it's now time for me to try my hand at it. And hope it doesn't absolutely crash and burn while I'm doing it.
What's up, gamers?
I look like a mess. Ignore that. Today is May 2nd, and I'm officially done with my short story. Thank God. And I printed it out as proof that I actually did it. Proof. Tentatively, I'm calling it From the Air Vent, because it centers around an air vent and a voice coming out of said air vent. Very clever, I know. I kind of hate the name because it's awful, and I'm not good at coming up with like names for the things that I write. So, not married to that name. Name falls flat quite a bit, and I'm probably going to change it at some point. Just not right now because I don't have anything better at the moment. This is one of the short stories of all time, most definitely. I'll go back through it later and clean it up a little bit, but yeah, it's something. I'll do a couple passes of editing. I do actually like it quite a bit, although it's kind of messed up. It's about murder, kind of. Have you ever noticed that a lot of creative people tend to write like really screwed up shit? Like, everybody who I've worked with, both in like film and in fiction writing, they've all had such a weird theme with everything they write. It's all pretty weird and sad stuff. Like last year, I was a producer on a short film, and the girl who wrote that short film and directed it, it was all about like grief and finding solace in like mundane things in your life, and things that remind you of people who are gone. I'll leave a link to it. It's called Cheese Puffs. I'm pretty proud of it. I don't know. But I digress. The short story is done. And now I'm going to write the treatment, which theoretically should take the least amount of time of everything that I'm doing for this project. So a treatment is like, it's like a very truncated prose version of a screenplay. It's really just so you like producers or executives or directors or whoever can get an idea for what the story is before it goes into production, or even before the screenplay itself gets written. It's like a proof of concept, kind of. But I personally find treatments to be pretty helpful as a writer because it's a way to outline for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this back, go through it with a highlighter or something, and start kind of blocking it off into important plot points, maybe going through and making notes about character things, like what are things that are Charlotte's character, Amanda's character, or Mr. Dancy's character, since those are my three characters. And from there, just kind of building myself an outline and then filling through the treatment as I'm doing it, hitting big story beats, big character arc moments, and then making sure those end up in the treatment and in the final script. So here's my to-do list. Number 1, treatment. Should be easy enough. Pretty informal as far as treatments go, but it's an outline, and that's what I need it for, an outline. Number 2, get the first bit of the screenplay written. My goal for this project is at least 10 pages, but if I hit like 9 pages and I need to write another scene, I'll go over 10 pages. That's fine. It's just to start getting my footing with the process itself of adapting from this into a script. Screenplay is going to be less easy than the treatment, but I'll be fine. I'm confident. It's not my first screenplay. I don't even think it's my 5th screenplay. It might be my 6th, maybe. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, 3rd thing, most important thing, I gotta get this edited. This that you're watching, that's gonna have to be like priority numero uno, because that is going to take the longest amount of time out of everything I have to do, and it's also the thing that I'm the least confident about. So hopefully what you've watched so far has not been a total disaster. But either way, I'm getting it done, and I'm gonna get it done because I have to get it done. Alright, I'll see you later. Now, let's look at my transition from prose to script. A walkthrough with myself, if you will. So, here I have my short story. As you can see, I have written and highlighted all over it. Most of this is notes that I made for the treatment, just going through and highlighting the most important moments where we learn things about each character, where we would have a scene change, etc., etc. I took these things, and especially going through and dividing up into these parts here, I've gone through and then taken that into my treatment. As you can see here, I've also divided my treatment into these same divisions. So I went through the short story, and every time there was a big scene change or something important happened, or we're going into a different room or different location, that I made into its own part, which then correlates to the numbers that you see along the sides of the treatment here. This helped me with breaking down the plot into digestible bits, and then I was able to transfer this big massive information within the short story into the treatment, which is a obviously much shorter, more easily digestible, but less detailed version of what I am creating here. Okay, so then from the treatment, I then was able to make the script, which, hooray, oh my gosh, the script exists. Okay, like I was saying here, with the treatment, I tried to put paragraph breaks wherever it's supposed to be a scene change in accordance with what is in the short story itself, because I knew that would help me as I moved on to writing the screenplay. I'm then using the breaks in the treatment as a roadmap as I'm writing the script. The script, I'm breaking up into these chunks, so I start with writing the scene designations, the slug lines, and then from there I go in and I take what is in this part of the treatment and bring that into these parts. And the parts here don't exactly line up here, but it gives me an idea of, like, thematically what needs to happen going through each of these scenes. So, I have a clear beginning and end marked out for me by doing this. So now it feels more like filling in a puzzle as I go, instead of just having to come up with stuff on the fly. And I'm not done with this yet. I don't have to be done, that's okay. But like, as you can see here, I've just towards the end, I've gone in and I've just put in all of my slug lines and scene transitions, just to give me a bit of a framework to work with yet. Like, that's fine. Not done yet, but I'll get there. It is coming along very, very nicely, as you can see. I'm so excited. Coming together nicely. I just thought that now would be a really good time to show how I've taken what I've been learning through this whole process and put it to use in creating this at the end here. So, I'm gonna get back to working, and I'll see you in the next update. Hello, welcome back to the broadcast. My name is Lena Shoemaker. Our top story tonight, I am losing my goddamn mind. So the end of the semester has crept up on me, and I had to put my writing on hold for a little bit, specifically after finishing writing the treatment. Basically, I got enough done to get the previous section filmed and then just kind of had to take a break. So it's about 4 in the morning right now. It's May 13th. I have put on a suit for dramatic effect. I need to write about 5 more pages of my screenplay, but I'm stuck. I'm panicking, just a little bit. I'm panicking. The stuff's starting to get real. Things are starting to happen. Graduation is very, very soon. I'm going to finish it. I have to finish it. I don't have a choice. I suppose I'm just gonna have to stay awake for a while. I have all of the pieces. It's just a matter of putting a metaphorical pen to metaphorical paper and just getting it done. So, I'll check back with you later. Let's recap. What is an adaptation? Per the definition we came to at the beginning of this video, an adaptation in terms of art and literature is a recreation of something from an original source. This could be a TV show inspired by a book series, or a cartoon based on a graphic novel based on a video game, or, in my case, a short film based on a short story. Basically, it comes from somewhere and it incorporates items like plot, setting, story, characters, themes, vibes, then it's an adaptation. How do we go from prose literature to finished screenplay? With a lot of blood, sweat, and fucking tears. That's how. First things first, learn about the medium you are adapting into. Starting with your source material, you create an outline of the plot, the character arcs, the goals of your characters, and what pushes them to get from point A to point B. Then you think about your narrative structure and what needs to be altered so that the feel and vibe and story of your narrative comes through. Just like what Stephen Chbosky had to do with the letter writing narrative format that he had in The Book Perks of Being a Wallflower when he made it into a film. Chbosky was able to convert this letter writing format into voiceover narration, an audiovisual solution for a text-based problem. And obviously, there's only so much you can learn about a creative process without actually doing it yourself. There's only so much you can learn just from hearing people talk about it or by reading about it. And since I've done it, I think I've learned a lot. Will I do this again? Maybe. Will I do it again soon? Hell no. But it has been an eye-opening and impactful experience. So, here we are. Years worth of work, research, writing, all condensed down into a single, however long this video is, minute video. This video is getting long, I can already tell. But yeah, I think it's incredible. It's incredible that I did a year's worth of work in less than a single semester. Definitely, but it's over. And thank God for that. I did finish one short story and one treatment and the bulk of one script in this short an amount of time. Wow. It's not great, but it's done. And at least the first little bits of that script is completely done because that's all I technically have to do for this assignment. But I am going to finish it after I edit this whole thing together, which is going to take a very long time. But I just, that's priority numero uno for now because I have less than a week to get this whole thing turned in, and Ooh, I need to get this thing turned in. You know, I feel like I should have something insightful to say now that I'm like at the end of this journey, but I'm kind of at a loss. I'm just stunned that number one, this thing got done like at all. And two, that I'm actually like decently happy with what I'm walking away with. Like, truthfully, I haven't written anything super creatively in a really, really long time. And like having to go through this process has been kind of cathartic for me in a way. It's incredibly stressful, obviously, and anxiety inducing, but helpful. And at the end of it, I know that I can still write. And that no matter how down or unsure of myself I may be, there's still some creativity left in me somewhere. So, as I close this chapter of my education and my writing journey, I would like to leave you with this. This was a really bad idea on my part. This was a very, very, very bad idea. And I do not recommend that anybody try this themselves. I have slept so little. I am so tired. But I am proud of myself. I have to keep telling myself that I am proud of myself. It's been a journey. It's been an exercise in pushing myself to my creative limits, to my time limits, and finding within myself that, yeah, I'm still capable of doing this stuff. No matter how hard my life gets, this is still something that I can do and that I feel confident in myself to be able to do. And that's honestly super refreshing. It's refreshing to know and helpful to know that no matter what happens in my life, I'm always still gonna have the ability to write. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time to walk through this whole journey with me. Thank you for giving me this chance. I'll see you at graduation.